Before we get started, let's do a really quick review of what we learned so far. So we've been talking about circles. Circles are the set of all points equidistant from a center point. We call that the center of the circle. So this is the circle, this is the center of the circle. The way we would name this would be circle A. We name it by the center point. The way we would write it is we draw a picture of a circle, including the center dot, and the letter that represents the center dot. Now, there were three segments that we learned about with circles: radius, diameter, and chord. So a radius, identified by lowercase r, goes from the center of the circle to the circle itself. A diameter, noted by a capital D, goes from the circle to the circle, but passes through the center. A chord goes from the circle to the circle. Now, a diameter is a chord. However, it's a specific type, one that goes through the center of the circle. So anytime you have a diameter, don't call this a chord. You'll get it marked wrong on tests and quizzes. Just call it a diameter. When you speak of a chord, this is what you're referring to. Now, we do have two relationships that we need to keep in mind, the relationship between the radius and the diameter. So when you look at the pictures side by side, it should be pretty obvious to you. If I took a radius and I made a second one on the same line, so I made a collinear radius here, if I had two of them side by side, I'd have a diameter. In other words, twice this equals that. So twice a radius would equal a diameter. The opposite would be that if I took a diameter and if I chopped it in two, in other words, if I got rid of one side of this diameter, I'd be left with a radius. So diameter divided by 2 is a radius. The other thing is in any circle, all diameters are the same. So if this diameter was 10 meters and I drew another one here, it would also be 10 meters. If I drew one like that, 10 meters, and so forth. If this radius was 3 inches, this radius would be 3 inches, so would that, and so forth. Alrighty, so today we are talking about circumference. The circumference is the distance around a circle. Think of it like perimeter for circles. Now, we have two specific formulas that we can use. One that utilizes radius, one that utilizes diameter, depending on what you get. So the two equations we have, circumference equals pi times diameter. If you know the diameter of the circle, use this, you're good to go. If you don't have a diameter and you have a radius, circumference equals 2 times pi times radius. Well, why is that? Well, if I put the 2 and the r together, I have circumference equals 2r times pi. And remember that equation, twice a radius equals a diameter. So this 2r I can replace with d. So in other words, these are the same. It's just here I'm writing d for diameter. Here I'm writing twice a radius. So whichever you feel more comfortable with using. Now, when you're plugging in these numbers, or whatever numbers you get from your circle, into this equation or this equation, when it comes to pi, if your calculator has a pi button, just use that. It'll make your life easier. If not, for this class, you can use 3.14. But you will get a difference if you use 3.14 versus the pi button. And the reason why is because pi is a non-repeating, non-terminating decimal. Your calculator, when you press that button, is going to plug in a lot more digits after the decimal point than just the hundredth place, 1-4. All right, so let's take a look at a couple example problems. So suppose that you needed to find the circumference of a couple circles. So this first one right here, you're told that it has a radius of 2.5 centimeters. You could have a picture and they could have the radius drawn, or it just could be a word problem and you get this information from it. You will be told to round to a nearest whole number, 10th, 100th, 1000th, etc. For this one, we're going to round to the nearest 100th. So what you're going to do is say, okay, I've got radius. So the equation that I'm going to use is circumference equals 2 times pi times radius, 2 pi r. If you didn't want to use that equation, you could say, okay, if the radius is 2.5, what would the diameter be? Well, remember, twice a radius equals diameter. Twice this would be 5. So if the radius is 2.5, that makes the diameter equal to 5 centimeters. And now just plug it into your equation. C equals pi times d, or C equals pi times 5. If you didn't want to do it that way, you could say circumference equals, remember it's 2 pi r. So we have circumference equals 2 times pi times 2.5. Either way, when you multiply this on your calculator, you're going to get some huge number. It's going to be 15.7079, blah, 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 blah. Now, it said to round this to the nearest hundredth. Well, remember, after your decimal point, the first place is your tenth. The next place is your hundredth position. So now I look to the right. If that number is 5 or more, increase this by 1. Since it is, I'm going to say this is about 15.71. And don't forget our units. They were centimeters, so I'm going to write cm. And that's how we do it. If you want to try this one on your own, press pause on the video, and I'll have the answer up in a second. All right, there was a second. So we've got circumference equals pi times diameter. In this case, our diameter is 16 feet. So circumference equals pi times 16. So again, using the pi button, you get a big, huge decimal, 50.265482457. I'll just write down the first couple. So again, we're going to round to the nearest hundredth. First digit after the decimal is tenth. Second one's the hundredth, so underline that. Look to the right. Is it 5 or more? Yes. So I increase that by 1. If it was not 5 or more, if this was, let's say this was a 3 or a 2 or a 0, I would just write 50.26. Since that number to the right was 5 or more, that's why it bumped up. The units here were feet, so I'm going to write feet, and there we go. All right, so do we feel pretty confident with that? Seems pretty easy, right? So let's take this to the next level and work it backwards. This question says, find the diameter if the circumference of a circle is 106.4 millimeters. So here, they're giving you circumference. They want you to find diameter. It's the same thing, just working it backwards. So we're going to use our equation that includes diameter. So we have C equals pi d. Now, we know the circumference is 106.4 millimeters. And to get d alone, remember, anytime you have something touching a letter, it's multiplication, the opposite is division. So I'm just going to divide both sides by pi. That cancels right there. So I have 106.4 divided by pi equals diameter. You're going to plug this into your calculator. Let's round this to the nearest hundredth. And when I do that, I end up getting about 33.87 millimeters. Now, if the question said, instead of finding diameter, find the radius, or maybe you were asked to find both, all you would do is you'd say, hey, if this is diameter, how do I get radius? Well, remember, radius is half of a diameter because it takes 2 radii to make a diameter. So you just take this thing, divide it by 2. That's it. When you divide it by 2, you end up getting 16.94 about, if you round to the nearest hundredth. So this would be your radius, and this would be your diameter. All right, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that lesson. See you next time.